Well, Ambassador, thanks very much for speaking with the ABC.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Let's start with Donald Trump. Obviously, these Liberation Day tariffs have sent shockwaves around the world. Japan is now sending a team of high-level negotiators to Washington, D.C. That sounds like it will happen soon. What do you feel? Do you believe that there's a good chance that Japan can strike a workable deal with this administration?
Well, first of all, thanks really very much for having me here. I think this is a really important moment to discuss a variety of issues, particularly facing the many challenges both Australia and Japan. And unilateral tariff measures that U.S. administration announced last week was a deeply regrettable announcement, and extensive restrictive trade measures will not only harm Japan, but also United States and the global economy. So we will talk with the United States extensively, but at the same time, this is really around 80 days of the inauguration of the Trump administration. Many of the policy announcements were made, but I think their efficacies and how they will be implemented remain to be seen. And then Tokyo is really thinking very carefully as to what would be the most effective way to address these challenges. And in fact, on Monday, Prime Minister Ishida had a telephone call with President Trump, and they agreed to continue the consultation on these issues at the ministerial level. So we will try and talk and negotiate with the United States to reach the satisfactory solution.
Do you think Australia and Japan can learn from one another here? Obviously, Australia is a bit constrained. We're in caretaker at the moment. But are Japan and Australia sharing notes on this, the best way to try and deal with the shocks coming from this announcement?
Well, I think last week, Prime Minister Ishida said all the options are on the table. But what he said is that he will not adopt tit for tat kind of approach. So basically, we are going to try to talk to the United States and try to find out the best solution. But in the course of it, I'm sure that it's very important. It's natural course to talk to other close friends and partners like Australia to both coordinate and find out a good solution.
What does this all mean for Australia and Japan? Obviously, the relationship stands on its own 2 feet, but it's also buttressed by the fact that we're both US military allies. If the US is becoming more of a disruptor rather than a pole of stability, does that undermine our relationship, or does it actually do the opposite? Does it make the relationship between Australia and Japan even more critical?
Well, I think this is really the early days of the new administration in the United States. And there's also positive news between Japan, the United States, and Australia and the United States. For example, last month, the American Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth visited Tokyo, and then he had a very constructive discussion with our Defense Minister Gen Nakatani, and U.S. Secretary of Defense reassured the U.S. security commitment towards Japan, and also he reaffirmed the importance of the free and open Indo-Pacific, where many countries like Australia and Japan are cooperating very closely together. And so as Minister Richard Marles, in February, prior to the Pete Hegseth's visit to Tokyo, Minister Marles went to Washington, D.C. and had a very reassuring, constructive conversation with Pete Hegseth. That's what I've heard from the Australian government. And on the day of the inauguration of the Trump administration, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, invited the Quad foreign ministers, and also the 4 foreign ministers confirmed the importance of the Quad, and also sent a very reaffirming message about free and open Indo-Pacific. So, of course, there's a trade issues that we have, but that's just one aspect of our relationship, alliance relationship between Japan and the United States and Australia and the United States. And I'm sure that countries like Australia and Japan will manage very wisely about the relationship with the United States, and our security alliance relationship for both Japan and Australia with the United States will endure the test of time.
Let's talk about some of the broader reverberations. In Southeast Asia, a lot of countries are obviously dismayed by these tariffs. Does Japan have any concerns about this having a real impact on US influence across Southeast Asia? And what can countries with big equities in the region, like Japan in particular, but also Australia, what can we do to help fill that gap and ensure an equilibrium?
Well, I think, for example, Southeast Asia and as well as the Pacific Island country, those are the very important neighbor countries. And both Japan and Australia have a very close cooperation. And in fact, both Japan and Australia coordinate very closely as to our policy towards Southeast Asia or other Pacific Island countries. So I'm sure that the cooperation between Japan and Australia, strategic cooperation towards those neighboring regions will continue, and probably we will strengthen it. But what is really important is that Japan really tried to cooperate with all those our development partners, all the development partners, in order to not to divide but unite the global community. I think Australia completely shares our perspective, and there's many areas that we should and we can cooperate together.
Let's go to the defence relationship. Yeah. Obviously, this year we'll have Japanese forces training with US counterparts in the top end for the first time. The broader defence relationship has really been transformed over the last 2 decades. Some people now say Japan and Australia are effectively allies in all but name. Is that a fair description now?
Yes, it is. But legally speaking, United States and Japan and also United States and Australia are legal security allies. Japan and Australia are security partners, very close, de facto security allies. However, we do not have a legal security relationship between Japan and Australia. So what I usually say is that the triangle relationship between United States, Australia, Japan resembles to isosceles triangle, just like this. And then in order to cope with the external pressure, this triangle has to make it closer to the equilateral triangle like that. And then one area that we should strengthen our cooperation is the defense industry cooperation to make it more equilateral. Of course, Japan and Australia, as you said, increasing our cooperation enormously. For example, like the level of training, Australian Defence Force and our self-defense forces bilaterally and multilaterally participated 39 exercises together last year. That means 1 in every 9 days. 1 in every 9 days somewhere in the world. It's very frequent. And also, as you said, the level of the training, the joint exercise is extremely high. Now that we have F-35 exercises together or the amphibious forces exercises together. So I think it's very natural that if you have that level of closeness or the frequency of the cooperation, we should have, the workers should have the same tool, same apparatus. So that means that we should share the defense industrial base.
Well, an obvious question on the defence industrial base, of course, is this future frigates program. As you know, Japan is now shortlisted, or Japanese industry has been shortlisted for this massive contract. What's your feeling? I know in the end this is a decision for Australia. Is Japan confident that its bid will be successful? And do you see this as primarily a strategic question or primarily a question around capability, or is it both?
Well, what I can say is that, continuing my discussion that in order to, this is the defense industrial base is really, really important issues for any country today. If you look at Russia's aggression against Ukraine, the risk of the global supply chains and economic security all indicate it's really important to improve the resiliency in the defense industrial base. For the country like Australia and Japan, who relatively have smaller defense industrial base, the one way to improve the resiliency is to share the base together. And then here, this procurement of the general purpose frigate came. And I think it can give a strategic opportunity to leapfrog our defense industrial cooperation together. Why? Because for the Mogami class, the leading company is the Mitsubishi Heavy Industry. But not only the Mitsubishi Heavy Industry, there's a number of companies involved, such as the Hitachi, Mitsubishi Electronics, or the NEC, and many others, who are the leading global manufacturing companies. So expanding all those defense companies coming over here will not only create local employment opportunity, but creating advanced manufacturing hub in Australia. And more than that, those companies like MHI or the Hitachi, defense portion is actually quite tiny. They are well-known, renowned for other areas, power generation, renewable hydrogen, or rocket space, heavy industries, or the railways. They are really global manufacturing big companies. So if they come, they have never come for the manufacturing purposes Australia yet, but if they come together, that would definitely have the synergy effect to advance made in Australia here. So I really believe this is one aspect. I'm not a military expert, so I cannot say this ship or that ship is better in terms of capability. But by choosing Japanese Mogami class and inviting Japanese defense industry has an extremely positive follow-on effect. And that's the things I think many Australian people should understand today.
Let's talk finally energy policy. Obviously, at the heart of the Australia-Japan economic relationship is energy, and in particular the gas that is sent from Australia to Japan. Now, as you know, the coalition has proposed a gas reservation policy. Let's ask, first of all, Peter Dutton said he'd given a heads up to Japan about this. Is that accurate? Did he give a heads up to you or a heads up to Tokyo? What shape did that take?
Well, what I can say to your question is that our embassy here in Canberra, and including myself, has various very close contact with the government, many people in the government, and also many people in the members of a parliament, including the opposition party, on daily basis with a wide range of topics. And so far, we are extremely happy about these relationships.
Are you extremely happy as well about the policy, though? Because we've seen, for example, this morning a think tank in Tokyo saying that this could have an impact on Japanese investment inside Australia, in the gas network. It could have flow-on effects. Is this a concern that the Japanese government shares about this proposal?
Well, first, that comment made by the private think tank. It's a private think tank, so it does not really reflect the Japanese government view. What I can say is that energy cooperation between Japan and Australia are extremely important, and particularly Japan's investment in the energy sectors are crucially important, not only for Japan's economy, but Australia's economic growth. And therefore, we have been and we will continue to cooperate with any Australian government in order to ensure a good, sound investment environment and policy stability, as well as to encourage further investment in Australia in variety of energy sector. So I mean, that's really the important area, and we are really, committed to talk with Australia and cooperate with the Australian government.
There have been an awful lot of gas policy proposals from both sides of government over the last decade or so. Does that create uncertainty for Japan and for Japanese gas companies in particular, or are they comfortable with this political back and forth?
Well, what I say is that, Japanese investment here in Australia are really thriving. There's a traditional sectors, energy sectors, minerals, etc., are also very, very, confident about the current status of our bilateral relationship. But at the same time, it's extremely important that in order to continue this, the consistent, the widening of investment here in Australia, the newly report made by the Herbert Smith Free Hills indicated that there's 141 billion Australian dollar investment here in this country last year. And then chunk of it is from the resources sector. And in order to have this investment here continue to flow from Japan, it's extremely important that the Australian government should have the predictability and the policy stability. That is key to invite investment here. And we are talking very closely with the various agencies here in order to ensure that kind of a policy stability and the environment here in Australia.
All right, Ambassador. Well, thanks very much for your time. Now, briefly, I know you've got Expo coming up in Osaka.
Yeah.
You wanted to say a couple of words about that as well. What's it about, just in 30 seconds?
Well, thank you very much. This is really the last thing that I wanted to say. This is the Myaku, who is really representing the Expo Osaka Kansai. And if I could, I really would like you to come over to Expo and make a good reporting about it. There's a lot unique Japanese cultural event and also the display of a cutting-edge technology by Japan. And many of the Australian people should know by visiting there. So if I may, I really would like to talk to your boss after this interview is over so that you can visit Japan.
Well, I'll do my best. I do love Osaka, though. Who could dislike Osaka? Ambassador, thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.